ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste my dear friends, this is second video on Viveka Chudamani of Adi Sankaracharya. This second video starts with the commentary on stanza number 10. Sannisaya sarvakarmani bhavbandhi vimuktaye yattam panditaya dhire atam abhyas upasthitah. May the wise and learned man give up all actions which are motivated by desires and start the practice of rediscovering the self and thereby attain freedom from the bondage of birth and death. Here is a piece of advice given to a man who has all the necessary theoretical knowledge of the science of self-perfection. He is told to renounce all activities motivated by self-aggrandizing hopes or disintegrating desires. This, this renunciation of the activities of the world is not to be overemphasized and misunderstood as is generally done, to mean that Vedanta is calling man to a life of lotus eating. It is only asking us to reduce over excitement in life and to curb the wasteful expenditure of our mental and intellectual energies born out of our unintelligent desires and lofty expectations. That good and sincere work will yield noble fruit should be a sufficient direction to guarantee us a peaceful passage for our pilgrimage here. But we expect the impossible, a noble return from a vicious or ill-planned action instead of the painful returns of sorrow that will yield to us many a terrible hour of unproductive anxiety and suicidal worry. A seeker who is striving to integrate himself is advised to walk the path of intelligent living. The renunciation of false values is only a negative aspect of self-making. Man-making fulfills itself in God discovery, and this spiritual art of perfection is not to be gained by a negative endeavor. Sankara specifies the positive aspect by saying, let him practice the various means of self-discovery. Stanza number 11. Chittasya shuddhaye karam netu vastu plabde प्लब्धये वस्तु सिद्धि विचारेण न किंचित कर्म कोटिभि. Selfless work and charitable acts help to purify the mind, but they do not by themselves contribute to the perception of reality. The discovery of the self is brought about only by discriminative analysis and never by any number of actions. This verse may give a novice the impression that Vedanta is decrying all the orthodox and accepted methods of religious practice. A child is told by his parents to revise his arithmetic tables every day. The obedient child soon gets into the habit of starting his day with a reading of the tables, but if the child continues his habit as a dull and unintelligent routine even in his postgraduate classes, It is but natural for his professor to laugh at his stupidity. Similarly, in the halls of Vedanta, the seeker is laughed at because of the time worn techniques of self development to which he has become habituated. But that does not mean that Sankara or the Vedantins are against them. The paths of karma, bhakti, etc. have certainly a place in the scheme of self development, and they are unavoidable in hauling up an animal through the various animal man through the various stages of self development to the pinnacle of perfection. Here Sankara points out that karma, when undertaken with a pure niskama bhava, purifies the inner instruments of feeling and understanding. The word shuddhi, used in connection with the mind, is to be understood as a greater degree of integration. The pure mind has a greater capacity to concentrate. When an action is undertaken with a motive, the individual must necessarily be shattered and fatigued under its persecution. On the other hand, when an act of charity or kindness is done in a spirit of dedication and love, with no ulterior motive, the mind cozily settles down and the peace that rises within the sadhak increases automatically and his personality becomes more and more integrated. Selfless actions do not help a seeker directly in his flights of self discovery, but they certainly have a place in one's sadhana inasmuch as they prepare the individual to transcend the ego and give him the wings for the last flight to the beyond. Sankara is uncompromisingly severe when he declares in his irrevocable statement that the self is not produced nor knowledge created as a result of finite actions, however noble, divine, and great they may be. Stanza number 12. सम्यग् विचारतः सिद्धा रज्जु तत्वा धारणा भ्रांतो आदित्य महासर्पेभ्यदु खविनाशिनी दुख विनाशिनी. The fear and sorrow created by the delusory serpent on the rope can be ended only after fully ascertaining the truth of the rope, which is available for recognition only through steady and balanced thinking. Why the discovery of the self is not possible through karma, and how this is possible by means of right thinking is being explained here by the famous analogy of the serpent and the rope. In Vedanta, this example is often quoted to make the student understand how the names and forms created through the ignorance of reality can end with the rediscovery of the truth underlying them. It is never possible that one who has seen the rope as a rope will ever have the fear and sorrow of a snake bite. But in the gathering darkness of dusk, a traveler mistakes an innocent rope to be a snake. The serpent delusion is created in the mind of the traveler because of his ignorance of the rope reality. Having thus been beaten by a delusory serpent, the individual, so long as he is under the delusion, suffers the agony of a snake bite, and if left alone will exhibit symptoms of blood poisoning too. But the traveler is advised to make an inquiry into his delusion. Faithful friends or near and dear ones will approach the deluded one and exclaim, "Oh, it is only a length of rope." He will accept this statement as a possibility because of his faith in his friends. But however much he may try, he will not enjoy complete peace of mind unless he himself sees the rope as a the moment he is led to the place of the incident and in a clear light he discovers the rope for himself, the fear and anxiety and the delusory snake and its bite all end. No amount of beating the rope in the darkness kill the snake or finally bring peace, happiness, and cheer to the individual. Even if the rope is burnt, he cannot find his balance again and take his mind away from thoughts of fear and pain caused by the snake bite. For he may still believe that he was bitten by a snake and it was the snake which was burnt to ashes. So, through karmas performed even for thousands of years, one cannot come to that joy of self discovery, the only method for which is to treat the path of discriminative analysis. This example, famous in Vedantic literature, is given by Sankara only to remind us how and in what way correct thinking can blot out the miseries of life, which are only the outcome of our misunderstanding and ignorance of reality. Stanza number 13. अर्थस्य निश्चयो दृष्टयो विचारेण हितो उक्तितः न स्नानेन न दानेन प्राणायाम शतेन वा. Neither sacred baths nor any amount of charity nor even hundreds of pranayamas can give us the knowledge about our own self, but a firm experience of the nature of the self can be gained when we send our thoughts along the rails of argument laid down in the salutary advices of the wise. Here again we find the superficial methods of easy religious practices condemned. Since the student is a Vedantin, Sankara's efforts are to show him the right and direct path, in thus indicating to the student the correct path. Every master has to be very severe in his criticism of the bylaws of religion. No doubt they too can help in the progress of the individual, but they all primary lesson techniques followed in the kindergarten are not applied in the university. A teacher must pluck out the seeker from his flounderings in the muck and mire of Marxism and put him on the firm metalled road to truth. Therefore, external methods of self purification, such as baths at the sacred confluences of rivers, visits to various temples, and other sacred places, desire prompted or even unselfish charities, exercises such as breath control or asanas are wholly condemned. The hasty convert to Vedanta suddenly finds it very convenient to give up every religious practice and call himself an accomplished Vedantin. This attitude also has no sanction in the master's advice. While condemning, while condemning these preliminaries, he is at the same time very strict and severe in prescribing the more subtle and intense practices of Vedanta. For a Vedantin, he prescribes correct thinking and continuous self analysis. Merely giving up the usual methods of religious discipline is not the Vedanta prescribed by the Acharya. If at all they are to be given up, it is only for a greater abhyasa called vichar. This Atma vichar is not to be done in any manner that pleases the individual. There is an exact method of correct and intense thinking, and this method is as advised in the scriptures. Therefore, which are undertaken as taught by the rishis, hitokitaha, alone can take us ultimately to our redemption. The fit student, stanza number 14. अधिकारिण मासा शास्ते फल सिद्धि विशेषत उपाया देश कालाद्या संत अस्मिन् सहकारिणः. Ultimate success in spiritual endeavors depends entirely upon the degree of fundamental qualifications in the seeker. Auxiliary conveniences such as time and place all have a place indeed, but they are essentially secondary. Here is a suggestion to seekers who generally get disappointed at having to encounter obstacles at the very outside of their sadhana. When a team of students is working under the instructions of the same master, it is always observed that some of them progress faster than others. Those who lag behind soon reach a state of despair and they complain about the hollowness of the Shastras. Such students are advised to attribute their lack of development to some intrinsic subjective maladjustments in their psychological and intellectual makeup. Adhikari is a word which has been much misinterpreted by hasty pundits who, in their loftiness, often rejected sincere seekers on the assertion that they were not properly qualified for Vedantic sadhana. This is absurd. No living man can conclusively judge another, especially upon these points. The qualifications necessary for a successful spiritual pilgrimage have been enumerated here by the Acharya only for the self-scoring of the seekers themselves. That is, if success on the spiritual path has been slow on unsatisfactory, the seeker himself is to blame. It is invariably because of some clogs of the heart. All that he has to do in order to achieve more progress in his efforts is to remove these clogs and apply himself more intensely to self development. This is true even in our everyday life. A brand new car, let us say, with a tank full of petrol is on the road and it stalls for no conceivable reason. Few owner drivers know anything about what lies under the bonnet of their car. Sitting in the driver's seat, they wrench out all the switches and labor with all the handles, and when they find that there is no response from the engine, they leave it on the curb and go home. But if in their place there were a professional driver, he is at once able to sense out the trouble spot. He gets out of his seat, raises the bonnet, and checks all possible points of engine trouble. After making the necessary adjustments, he resumes his seat and the machine responds to his demands. Similarly, when in meditation a sadhak finds his mental avenues blocked, it is meaningless for him to sit in the asana and rave in disappointment, cursing the entire hierarchy of rishis or the science of Vedanta. He must at once lift the bonnet of his bosom and look within to see if the necessary adjustments are all properly maintained therein. The description of the necessary qualification is for our guidance, that we may know what are the common troubles that arise in the inner vehicles during our flight to the beyond. There are some seekers who wait for better circumstances to do their sadhana, a more suitable time, or a greater master to initiate them. No doubt time, place, etc. are important, but not unduly so, for they are only subsidiary requirements. Without the needful inner adjustments, even if a sadhak is placed under the best conditions of time and place, he will not be able to make use of them. On the other hand, a true seeker, even under adverse conditions, will turn them to the best advantage and will progress steadily unhampered. These prerequisites are described in detail in verses 16 and 17. Ato vicha, the stanza number 15. अथो विचारः कर्तव्यो जिज्ञासो रात्रिं वस्तुनः समासाद्य दया सिंधुं गुरुं ब्रह्म विदुत्तमम्. Therefore, a true seeker of the self should learn to inquire and meditate after duly approaching a guru who is himself established in the experience of the self and who is an ocean of kindness. For the reasons so far given, it should be the endeavor of a true seeker to find a true master and approach him duly to get initiated into the methods of inquiry through the process of meditation. Here a true guru is described. Just as there are essential qualifications for a true disciple, there are those also which are essential to make a man of wisdom a true and efficient guru. It is not every man of realization who can efficiently take up the work of directing others on the path towards the goal. A guru should be not only a man of self-experience, but he should also have a large heart full of kindness and sympathy for all types of seekers. This is an indispensable requisite, for without it, the master will not be able to go down to the level of the disciples and sympathetically appreciate their difficulties in understanding the Shastras and in living up to the high discipline that is expected of them by the Shrutis. The word samsadhya, by duly approaching, is a simple word full of suggestions. It pinpoints the mental attitude with which a seeker should approach the master in order that he may derive the maximum benefit during his intercourse with the teacher. Verse number 16. Medhavi Puruso विद्वान उपा विचक्षण है अधिकार्य आत्म विद्या मुक्त लक्षण लक्षित है. He who has a keen memory with enough knowledge of the world outside and understanding of the world within, who can argue for the scriptures and refuse arguments against them, is fit for receiving Atam Vidya. Here are mentioned some essential qualities in a student before he can successfully undertake a study of the Upanishads. The power of memory, Medha, is not merely a prodigious capacity that some have to memorize an impossible number of scriptures in a very short time. Among the men of letters in England, there was once a mania to memorize long poems, and we are told many could recite the whole of Milton's Paradise Lost or an entire Shakespearean drama. This sort of mechanical memorizing is not what is meant by Medha memory power here. By memory, Sankara means a capacity on the part of the student to react intensely to an experience at the time of its occurrence so that later on it automatically, without any effort, springs forth into the level of memorized experiences. In this sense, none of us lacks the power of memory. Even those who cannot memorize a single stanza or a paragraph can remember some incidents of their childhood. This clearly shows that they have generally a good memory. A student attending the discourses given by a master is therefore required to react intensely to his words and thus make the ideas and theories explained his own at the very time of listening to them. There is no question of writing down notes and learning them later on as modern college students do. The study of Vedanta insists on an immediate understanding. He who has this capacity is fit for a study of Vedanta. If there be a student who could not understand what the master said on a previous occasion, then as the lessons proceed, the master will not be able to give his discourses freely, since the student at every moment will have to speak out his misunderstandings, doubts, and confusions. Every time the teacher will have to go back to the chapters finished earlier, and that would necessarily mean no progress at all. Such a dull headed, wool gathering mind is not a fit instrument for the study of the science of Vedanta. Vidwan, learned or well informed. This does not mean a man who is already well versed in the scriptures, because without listening to the teachings of a master, no amount of self study in the scriptures will make one a true Vidwan. What is meant here is that the student must have a fairly good general knowledge of the world outside and also a certain amount of insight into his own psychological and intellectual composition. The more general knowledge an aspirant has, the easier it will be for the master to make him understand the subtle truth through a variety of examples, parables, and metaphors. An argumentative spirit of inquiry and understanding is also absolutely necessary for walking the path of knowledge. In the other paths of self discovery, this spirit of independent inquiry is not so much emphasized, because the seekers walking them do not demand an explanation for personal conviction, but for the man who wants to walk the path of knowledge, neither a blind faith in the scriptures nor in the teacher can supply a sufficient motive force. He needs a conviction that rises from within himself, born out of his own intelligent thinking and intellectual absorption of ideas. Summarily, a student of Vedanta must be a man of receptive and agile intellect, ready to catch every subtle idea thrown out by the master and through a process of intellectual assimilation get at its true significance. If this agility of the head and heart is lacking, he cannot hope to have a steady and unobstructed progress in meditation. In the following verses, Sankara gives details of the qualities which are prerequisite prerequisites for a student of Vedanta. Stanza number 17. विवेकिनो विरक्तस्य समाधिगुणशालिनः मुमुक्षोरेव हि ब्रह्मजिज्ञासा योग्यता मता. He alone is considered qualified to enquire after the supreme reality, who has discrimination, detachment, qualities of calmness, etc., and a burning desire for liberation. If the former verse gives us the broad characteristics of those who are fit receptacles for knowledge, here we have more clearly acid specifications. These terms have often been found to frighten away the students, since their orthodox interpretations have been rather severe and relentless. But on a closer analysis, they are found to be very healthy instincts present in every bosom. Only a very few of us, however, are conscious of them, and even fewer consciously develop these qualities in themselves. Viveka is the capacity to discriminate between the real and the unreal, between the true and the false, between the permanent and the impermanent. It is, it is faculty which we employ in almost all our day-to-day decisions, but when it is brought to play into the inner constitution of the individual, it is called Viveka. Vairagya is commonly translated as detachment. For many, it holds an uncanny fear, for it seems to point more to a condition of a living death than to a state of a better and fuller living. The Vairagya of Vedanta is only a fulfillment of Viveka. Having discriminated between the real and the unreal, it should not at all be agonizing to pluck themselves away from the false. When, through discrimination, we are intellectually convinced of the fallacy of our way of thinking, detachment is the fructification of that discrimination. Accordingly, it manifests to the degree to which we have been convinced by our discrimination. When I am convinced that my shadow is not really me, it does not take an iota of my energy to rid myself of the sorrows of my shadow. Even if 10,000 elephants pass over it, I shall still smile and be happy, for I know that no matter how much my shadow is trampled upon, it cannot bring me any pain. Sama, calmness, this and associated qualities will be taken up by Sankara in the coming verses, and we shall be going into them at length there. For the time being, suffice it to go, suffice it to understand that these are the mental values in life which should be cultivated by a healthy man with an evolutionary urge. Success in any creative thinking will be directly proportional to the amount of these qualities in an individual. Even in the material world, an individual's success can be increased if only he develops these qualities in himself. Last but not the least of the four qualifications mentioned here is mumukshutva, a burning desire for liberation. This, in its old drapery, may have the ugly look of an impracticable idea. Liberation is by and large understood to be a gain post mortem which the seeker will enjoy only after his death. This is not a sufficient inducement to the modern man, full of impatience and with an unquenchable thirst for practical gains. These are days when we want immediate gains. No one is ready to invest anything in the expectation of an immense gain promised in the future. This being the attitude of the age, we find that this promise of Vedanta in its obsolete explanation does not appeal to us in its subtler implications. Mumukshutva indicates an immediate benefit which is directly proportional to the amount of effort invested. Mumukshutva is a deep desire to rid oneself of one's limitations felt and experienced during one's intercourse with the world, whether it to be whether it be through one's body, mind, or intellect. A true seeker gets impatient with these physical, mental, and intellectual limitations in living a full life, and he who has come to protest vehemently against life's limitations and who is struggling earnestly to overcome them is the mumukshu, the spirit of revolt against one's self-settling weakness is the spirit absolutely necessary in order to set forth in seeking new powers and gaining new strength. Verse number 18, the four qualifications. Sadhana साधनानि यत्र चत्वारि कठिनानि मनुष्यभिः येषु सत्स्वैव सन्निष्ठा यद्भावेन सिद्ध्यति. Great sages have spoken of four qualifications for attainment, which when present succeed in the realization of Brahma and in the absence of which the goal is not gained. The four prerequisites described in the previous verses are the determining factors in a seeker which ensure success. To the degree in which these four are present in a sadhak, to that degree his success in spiritual endeavors is assured. Whenever a seeker struggling on the path does not make a definite progress, he should look within himself for the absence of these qualifications. Sankara is emphasizing that a seeker must first of all try to see that he is fully equipped with these qualifications, and at all periodical reverses in spiritual progress, the sadhak, instead of despairing, must intelligently evaluate himself and detect his own deficiencies. When a patient looks pale, the doctor will immediately examine him for deficiencies. To make up the deficiency, he will supply him with the necessary ingredients. Similarly, when a spiritual seeker is fagged out, it is never due to an external obstacle as people generally complain, but always because of a serious deficiency in his spiritual constitution. Verse number 19. Ado nityani anitya vastu vivekah pariganyate iha mutra phal bhog virag stan danantaram sam adi sat karam sampatti mumuksu vimati saputam. While enumerating the qualifications, first we count the ability to discriminate between the real and the unreal. Next comes as a spirit of detachment from the enjoyment of the fruits of actions here and hereafter. After that is the group of six essentials such as sama, and last is undoubtedly a burning desire for liberation. Here in sequence the Acharya repeats the necessary attributes for a student who wants sure success on the spiritual path. While giving a rough outline of these, elaborates upon the theme of Viveka and Vairagya. Though potentially their Viveka is not generally awakened in all men, however actually intelligent the generation might be. It is the special privilege of a few to have the subtlety of intellect to delve deep into things and happenings and discriminate between the true and the false. Those who are sufficiently evolved exhibit a greater keenness of intellect, but those who do not have it should not despair, for it is not a God given bonus which comes to us from the heavens, but it is the aroma of a well developed and integrated mind and intellect. Where there is a large amount of viveka, it is safe to presume that the individual has a fairly well integrated personality. Running away from life in cowardice, retiring to a jungle in languor of intellect, unappreciation of things around and about us, denial of the bare necessities of the body, these are not vairagya. Many educated pundits too tell us that detachment means a life of complete mourning and bereavement, an unnatural existence which has nothing to do with the life lived by others in society. This interpretation is quite wrong and harmful. As a result of one's discriminative capacity, when one differentiates between the real and the unreal in the world outside or in the world within, all false values automatically drop off. When once a thing is understood to be full of bitterness, pain, and imperfection, rare is the man who will continue to court it. Invariably, we run after a thing only when we hope to get out of it a greater fulfillment of joy or peace. Once we come to the intellectual appreciation that the object is riddled with sorrow, our immediate attempt would be to get rid of it. Thus, Vairagya, born out of Viveka, is what is meant by detachment. In fact, Vairagya is the fulfillment of Viveka, and wherever the former is strong, the latter gains in essence and efficiency. Therefore, when Sankara defines Vairagya in the vocabulary of his times as detachment from all the fruits of one's actions here and hereafter, he only means that a spiritual seeker must come to a sufficiently strong intellectual conviction that fruits born as a result of actions cannot be infinite. Hence, he must of necessity be totally detached from them. These results of action reach us in the form of circumstances in the outer world and mental conditions within, and when that mind reacts to those circumstances, we gain our day to day experience. The other two requisites mentioned in verse 17 are repeated here. The six qualifications, such as sama and a passion to redeem oneself. Mumukstvam. Verse number 20. Brahm Satyam Jagan Mithe Varupo Vinishchaya Soyam Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka Samudahirta. A firm conviction of the intellect that Brahma alone is real and the phenomenal world is unreal is known as discrimination between the real and the unreal. Here is a complete and exhaustive definition of the faculty of discrimination. In its application to a student of Vedanta, discrimination is the capacity to know the real from the unreal, from a mixture of things, for truth or reality is that which is changeless and ever present. Just as scientists inquire about the basis of life by an analysis of the things of the outer world, so too the scientists of the inner world, the rishis, tried to understand the fundamental of life in us. This fundamental is that truth which is changeless and omnipresent. So when we inquire into life and try to understand it in its pure essence, we come to experience that life which is present everywhere at all times. This universal factor, the substratum, is what is meant by the word Brahma in Vedanta. To come to a logical understanding and arrive at complete intellectual appreciation of the fact that this permanent substratum alone is the ever existent, changeless, formless, and therefore immortal, is to understand that Brahma alone is real and the world of plurality that we now cognize is unreal and imperfect, although it be its magnificent and wondrous manifestation, changeable, impermanent, and joyless. To build up life in this correct perspective and to order our existence on the basis of this value is called Viveka in Vedanta. तद्वैराग्यम जिहासा या दर्शन शरणादिभि देयादि ब्रह्म पर्यंतन है नित्य भोग वस्तुनि. This is stanza number 21. That desire to give up all transitory enjoyments gained through seeing, hearing, etc., and also experiences gained through equipments ranging from a mortal body to the form of Brahma is called detachment. A complete and exhaustive explanation of Vairagya is given here. It is not only a detachment from external objects and circumstances that are conducive to joyous experiences, but it is a mental condition in which the mind no longer runs after the phenomenal world in the hope of gaining peace or joy. The idea is that through discrimination, when one has come to at least intellectually appreciate that sense objects have not in themselves any intrinsic value for joy and that they are ephemeral, naturally the mind will never take wandering flights into the realm of the objects with a craving for them. It has been logically concluded in our Shastras that a man's mind will constantly hover around and land on objects only when it is convinced that there are three desirable qualities in them. They are a sense of reality, satya tattvam of the objects, a belief in their permanency, nityatvam, and a faith that they contain potentialities for satisfying our craving for joy, samadhi tattvam, samahit tattvam. Perceived when we understand through discrimination that the objects perceived through the senses are all in fact unreal, asat, ephemeral, anitya, and that they have no real capacity to give us joy, riddled with sorrow as they are, our minds will not pant for them. In Sri Gyaneswara's commentary on the Gita, the Yogi Raja beautifully brings out this idea in a series of inimitable smiles, describing the attitude of a man of detachment towards sense objects. He gives some examples which are very striking and effective. He says that a man of true detachment will run towards sense objects with as much enthusiasm as one would rush out to embrace a dead queen's rotting body, with as much satisfaction as one would decide to quench one's thirst by drinking the pus flowing out from a leper's wound, and with as much readiness as one would enter a boiling cauldron of molten iron to take a refreshing bath. It is a very powerful way of expressing the idea that where the intellect has come to a firm conviction about the hollowness of sense objects, the mind will not gush forth towards them with hopes and expectations of satisfaction therein. This sense of detachment that arises from a full application of one's discriminative faculty is called true vairagya. Stanza number 22. Virjaya Visay Varta Dosah Drishtuva Muhurmuhu Saulakse Nitavasta Mansa Sam Uchate. The peaceful state of the mind when it rests constantly upon the contemplation of the goal after having again and again detached itself from the chaos of the sense objects through a process of continuous observation of their defects is called sama. Sankara now enters into a discussion of the six qualities which are essential in the constitution of a mind and intellect for making a pilgrimage to their fulfillment in jnana. These are not enumerated to frighten away the unqualified. I have already emphasized that a discussion of the necessary qualifications in Vedanta is more for a self-analysis and adjustment than for exercising a tyranny upon the seeker. The first among the sixth qualification is sama, calmness of mind. This calmness descends upon the mind when it comes to rest in its meditations, free from the agitations created by its continuous desire for sense objects. But when the mind is thus taken away from the sense objects, it cannot be relieved of its sense thoughts at all at once. It is the nature of the mind to entertain thoughts, and if it has nothing better to do, it will dwell on one or the other objects of the world. Therefore, it is enjoined in all the yogas that the mind should be soaked some way or the other with an idea greater, nobler, and diviner than sense objects. Unless we train the mind to revel in a subtler and diviner field, it cannot redeem itself from the field of ordinary pursuits. In bhakti, the devotee employs his mind constantly in the meditation of his beloved Lord, and therefore the mind is automatically drawn away from its pursuits of sense objects. In the path of knowledge, in the early stages, the mind is to be given an alternative field for occupation. Therefore, a mind basking in the contemplation of the all-pervading consciousness or awareness, Brahma alone is the mind that can successfully detach itself from sense objects. Not only should the mind steep and maintain and steep itself in Dharma by meditating upon the glories of the goal, but it should be whipped away from its mischievous fields of false entertainments by making it constantly aware of the weaknesses and imperfections of the field of objects. The more we gain control over the mind and through that control withdraw it from its revelings in the field of finite objects, the more will it become equanimous, peaceful and serene, and this condition of calmness in the mind consciously brought about by a lived discipline is meant by the word sama. So at this stage I conclude this video. Next video number 3 will start with verse number 23 of Viveka Chudamani. Thank you. Namaste.